Well, welcome back to Highwater Trekkies podcast. I'm Katy.
I'm Sam. Hi, guys.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Katy.
How are you today?
I am here, ready to try to record this episode. How are you today?
Same. I'm here. My confidence level is a lot lower now that we're here than it was when I was doing the research for this episode, but...
Confidence is plummeting, guys.
I do want to say really quickly that our last several episodes I've actually really liked.
Same.
Just personally, and I'm taking that to mean that we're improving, so.
Okay, I like that. I agree. I think our episodes are starting to get a little better. But we haven't really started this one today, and it, for some reason, feels like a doozy, so... But yes, I will cautiously agree with you that perhaps we're getting a little bit better at this.
Maybe we should start off differently with an attitude of tooting our horns instead of being like, we might be terrible, guys. We're sorry.
Like, did you guys listen to that last episode? Because it was badass. To be fair, though, I really did like our last episode, and it really ties into today's topic as well. So, the last time we talked about dehydration, and again, it's a good one. I really like this episode. Who knew that delirium would be such a good look on us? I'm not sure, but it works.
It did work in our favor.
Let's try it again today. So today we're just going to be talking about hydration and all sorts of things to do with hydration, I do believe, and specifically how we as backpackers like to stay hydrated and why that's important and some good things like that.
Yes. And it sounds, I like how you said hydration, and it sounded very simple, and it is anything but. So I will say right off the top that if you do start going down the road of researching hydration, you're probably going to run into the same thing that you do when you research nutrition, which is a ton of conflicting information and a lot of debate out there among researchers. They're going to hear all kinds of things. So
it's hard to know what to believe sometimes.
It really is. I think maybe the key is to use several different resources, and whatever's repeated throughout those is probably a little closer to the truth.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot, and so I think hopefully Sam and I, as we usually end up doing somehow without pre-planning, have maybe used different resources, and maybe we can have some opportunity to talk about, variances in what we found.
Right.
Just because that's always interesting.
It is, and we hope that we're reporting correct information. We do try to do our due diligence when we're doing our research, but, it's possible that some of this information is not 100% correct, but we are trying.
Yeah, and if it isn't, just know we didn't pull it out of our ass. It came from somewhere.
Right, so we pulled it out of someone else's ass.
And on that note, I will go ahead and say at the top that my three primary sources were Dr. Stacy Sims, Dr. Sam Chevron, and Dr. Robert Kinnifick. Most of my information came from some podcasts. Dr. Sims also has a book that I've done a little bit of reading in. Dr. Chevron and Dr. Kinnifick were both guests on 2 episodes of a series called The Science of Ultra, and they were really interesting to listen to. Like, this is kind of their field, but they also do a lot of this research in relation to, I think they kind of work more with the military.
Okay.
So that was kind of interesting to me.
Cool.
And Dr. Stacy Sims is really neat. She focuses a lot of her research more on women specifically, so we will kind of get into that a little later too.
Awesome. And
I'll, of course, link them. I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way so that as I'm reading, I don't have to be like, Dr. Sims says.
Yeah.
So,
gotcha.
Anyways.
If you listen to our previous episode, like I said, we talked about dehydration, and we talked a whole lot about what water does for us and for our bodies. So our bodies are made up of literally trillions of cells, And every one of those cells, all of our tissues and organs, everything in our body needs water and fluids to work properly. Hydration performs so many jobs in our physical bodies, as Katy really talked about in our previous episode. So things like transporting nutrients, aiding digestion, regulating our temperature, lubricating and cushioning our joints, helping blood flow to our brain. All of these things are made possible by water, and so it's very important that we replenish the water that we need to make all these systems work properly. So today we just want to talk about why hydration matters as backpackers, and maybe why hydrating while backpacking is a little bit different than our everyday lives.
I feel like for some reason my brain is like, body functions brought to you by water.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
That's what I thought of.
That's perfect. We're leaving that in.
So hydration is really complicated, and for that reason, my notes, for one, are an absolute mess, and I'm not sure where to begin.
Same.
So where I'm going to start, and I don't know if it's going to make sense, but it will later, I promise, because a part of this conversation is going to be including kind of just exertion. The exertion of energy is going to play a big role in how much water we may lose, especially as backpackers or other types of athletes. So speaking to that a little bit, I don't know how long you've been around, but many moons ago in our food episode, I talked a little bit about a YouTuber called Gear Skeptic, and he had a series of videos that he did on backpacking nutrition, where he broke down nutrition for optimal performance, basically. And something that he mentioned that he came across when he was doing that was how all of the research regarding nutritional needs was related either to weight loss or to endurance athletics like marathons or bicycle races. So it didn't exactly include the level of lower but very long sustained exertion that we might experience during a backpacking trip. So he did a lot of the heavy lifting for us, using several different studies to kind of extrapolate what the average intensity level of hiking or backpacking might look like. And intensity level is usually measured in VO2 max, which is just a measure of the maximum amount of oxygen that your body can use during exercise. You might also see this referred to as peak oxygen uptake, maximal oxygen uptake, or maximal aerobic capacity if you're doing your own research. So to give us a frame of reference, a 25% VO2 max is comparable to just kind of a normal walking pace. A 65% VO2 max would be the greatest running pace sustainable for about 2 to 4 hours. And then an 85% VO2 max is the greatest pace sustainable for 30 to 60 minutes. So a 45% VO2 max is the number that he landed on for backpacking. It's kind of right smack between just regular walking and the running pace that you can sustain for 2 to 4 hours. The reason he made it higher than a walking pace, obviously, was to kind of account for the exertion of carrying a lot of weight on our backs and going up and down hills all day, I guess. He does go through like everything that he did to kind of account for this. I will link those videos. But basically, it's not a perfect or a proven figure. I think in the video he says let the fudge factors fly, which I find hilarious. But it is a decent reference point. Mm-hmm. And again, the reason I'm even going into this is that a lot of these same factors that help us to determine our nutritional needs are also going to help us determine our hydration needs. So a lot of hydration recommendations that we might go over today might be for endurance athletes, and a lot of that research might be based off of ultra runners or marathon runners. So with that in mind, we can kind of just mentally adjust that to what backpacking might look like. So there you go.
Cool. That makes sense to me. So I think Katy is going to quickly give us kind of a little breakdown of just what some common phrases and words mean when we're talking about hydration, right?
Yes, and this was probably a lot more for my benefit than maybe anyone else's, because a lot of these I just kept coming across and I wasn't really sure what they meant. Some of them were new information that I learned. So I'll start with, apparently there's a ton of different terms that reference different states of hydration or different measures of fluid and electrolyte balance. But the three most commonly used within sports medicine are euhydration, which is our normal total body water, and that fluctuates by plus or minus 1%, which we will talk about a little later. There's hypohydration, which is the static state of being dehydrated, and then dehydration, which we're all probably most familiar with, is actually more of a verb, so it's the active process of losing water during exercise, which I thought was interesting. I personally had never heard the term euhydration before.
I don't think I have either.
And then electrolytes, I'm sure most of you know this, but I just was kind of like, well, let's define it.
Right. So
these are our essential minerals, and fun fact, they actually carry an electric charge when dissolved in water or other body fluids, hence the name electrolytes. I did not know this, I don't know why, but I'm very excited by it.
Right.
Some of the most common ones include sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, hydrogen phosphate, and hydrogen carbonate. Many of these are absorbed through our diet, which is why the electrolytes that we put on our water don't necessarily need to go overboard, and a lot of them you may not even see some of these things in. Another term I came across a lot was osmolality.
Yes.
Which is a measure of the concentration of all chemical particles found in the fluid part of our blood. So osmolality can increase when you are dehydrated and decrease when you have too much fluid. A normal healthy osmolality of blood is between 275 to 295 milliosmoles per kilogram. Of course, it varies. And then rolling right off of that, I don't know how important this is, but I had never seen milliosmol before, and I came across this measurement so many times. It sounded like a foreign language to me. I think I was reading it miliosmoly because my brain didn't make the connection to like osmolality. So anyways, I looked it up. It's a unit of measurement that is equal to 1,000th of an osmol, which was not helpful because I don't know what an osmol is. But an osmol is a unit that measures the number of particles, like ions or molecules, in a solution that contribute to its osmotic pressure. Don't know what osmotic pressure is. So it is the force that drives the movement of water across a semi-permeable membrane to equalize the concentration of solutes on both sides. So I think that kind of makes sense. Does it like that makes sense in terms of hydration?
It's osmosis, baby.
Osmosis. So yeah, milliosmoles are used in medical and scientific contexts to basically measure the concentration of solutes in body fluids like our blood or urine, which helps them assess the overall osmolality or solute concentration in a solution. Hypoxia comes up in relation to exercise. You can get hypoxia from a lot of different things, but exercise-related hypoxia is when our bodies experience a decrease in arterial oxygen tension and oxyhemoglobin saturation. Again, this kind of just has to do with when our body is under stress, it's going to affect our oxygen and our blood flow in certain parts of the body. I'm not going to go into the more like detailed definition that I wrote down because it's too much, but you can just think of how we sometimes mention the body redirecting certain things under certain circumstances. So in a state of hypoxia, our body is redirecting oxygen and blood.
Okay.
Urine-specific gravity can be measured with a refractometer, which I got to do when I worked at a vet office, and it is weirdly very fun. You can also measure it with dipsticks that you buy on Amazon where you compare the color to a chart. It's just another measure of the concentration of solutes, specifically in our urine, and it just measures the ratio of urine density compared to water density. A normal range for urine-specific gravity tests is about 1.005 to 1.030, always with a slight variance. And then serum sodium, this came up last time when we were talking about hyponatremia. Sodium is an essential electrolyte in our bodies for maintaining fluid balance and other things, but we're talking about fluids today. So the normal range for our serum sodium levels is around 135 to 145 milliequivalents per liter. And as we discussed last time, a super low serum sodium level would be when we have hyponatremia. So, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you for those definitions. I'm looking forward to hearing them come back up later in our conversation, so I will have a little bit more context for understanding them.
And I can say milliosmol now instead of milliosmoly.
Milliosmoly is pretty amazing, though.
It kind of sounds like some sort of dip or food. I don't know.
Maybe you should make it
Milliosmoly sauce.
It's got to have some like homemade noodles or something in there.
Oh, God.
Okay, so when we're talking about hydration, I think our goal is to be hydrated on a cellular level. And really what that is all about is osmosis, like Katy was kind of just talking about, and we're going to talk about more. So as I said earlier, you know, our body is made up of trillions of cells, trillions. All of these cells require water, fluid to maintain their structure, and in turn just to function properly. So if you don't have enough water circulating through your body, water will be drawn from the inside of cells due to increased osmotic pressure, which causes simply cells to shrink. So when your body contains more water, this lowers the concentration of solutes in your body fluids, and that allows more water to move inside of your cells. And we may talk about this more, but ultimately that water restores your cell shape and avoids shrinkage, which turns out is kind of the ultimate goal with hydration, is to avoid cellular shrinkage. New goal in life.
Can that be a t-shirt?
I think it should
Avoid cellular shrinkage.
I mean, I've even put it in larger font than anything else in my notes. Yeah. So that's our goal. Keep in mind, guys.
I love that.
It's important. And we're going to talk about why. And I think a lot of the reason why is we are just pretty much made up of water, right? It seems like it's kind of a debate on exactly how much of our bodies are made up with water. I found numbers, 50 to 80%. What do you think? How much water are we?
I did as well. The different sources that I used ended up kind of zeroing in on 60% body water by composition as an average, but the variance was from 50% to high 70%. And the reason for this, which I hadn't actually come across before, all has to do with lean body mass. So lean body mass has a physiological constant of about 73% water, which I hadn't heard of before.
So even within humans, the amount of water that makes up our bodies can really vary.
It can, and this is because fat just isn't able to hold on to as much water as our muscle mass is. And so females are actually more around the 50% of that range, and that does have to do with the way that physiologically we just tend to have less lean muscle mass than men. In general, of course, generalized statement.
Right.
So that's kind of what I came across, kind of the same number, 2/3 of that being in our cell and 1/3 of it extracellular. Of that third of extracellular, 20 to 25% is in our plasma volume, and then the rest is in our interstitial fluid around our cells. So a lot of the measures of hydration that we'll talk about today that we did talk about, like osmoality or urine-specific gravity, they tend to be a measure of how much water we have in our blood versus these other spaces in our body. So
interesting.
So yeah. I need to stop saying so yeah or so there you go after everything that I
need to stop saying interesting.
But it is.
It is. True. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how we lose water. Why do we need to intake water? Where does it go?
Yeah, and what does all of this information mean?
Right.
So some of these we probably are already familiar with. We lose water or fluid in general when we sweat, which of course happens when we're exerting energy or when we're in a hot environment trying to thermoregulate. We also do lose it through our skin, not through sweat, but through transcutaneous water loss. Our skin is semi-permeable, and we are very watery, so we're actually losing water through our skin on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. We also lose it through respiration. We use it through our urine because we just have to flush our metabolic waste in general to live. And then, this is a side note, but I looked up what a normal amount to pee is because I've always been curious about this. And of course, there's a huge variance, again, as with everything we're talking about today. But I did see that a well-hydrated person should probably be peeing a strong, steady stream. That was important.
Okay.
A strong, steady stream.
Don't be dribbling.
Every 2 to 3 hours. And some research was showing that a well-hydrated person will pee about 5 times within a 24-hour period, while someone who is dehydrated may only pee about 3 times in 24 hours.
Okay, so. Can I tell you, I feel like some people at this table double that amount.
Oh, I had it in my notes. I'm guilty.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk about why I probably pee way too much a little bit later.
I don't know if you pee too much. I'm just saying, like 5 times in one day, like... It's like Katy before noon.
But yeah, exactly. Probably like 10 times. And then, of course, we can also lose a lot of fluid when we're ill, when we have vomiting or diarrhea. Losing fluid this way is a little bit different than like sweat and thermoregulation because it's coming from like all kinds of different spaces in our body. We also tend towards ending up with a greater electrolyte imbalance when we lose fluid through illness than we do just through sweat.
Okay.
So
that makes sense. I read that humans, on average, roughly lose 2 liters of fluids per day just from being alive, breathing, perspiring, peeing, pooping, all those things. I don't know if that's correct, but I thought that was interesting.
It is, and it kind of leads into something that I wrote down that I'm kind of excited to talk about because it has a little bit of math, not a lot, but... I guess this kind of does tie back into, and we'll talk more about like why body weight and the percentage of our weight that is water matters when we're trying to figure out hydration. And it is because, like Sam said, there is a measurable amount that you can lose through sweat and through these other things. And so I came across this one source, and they were talking about how we can think about how much fluid that we're losing as a volume per unit of energy expended. So they gave mils per kcals of energy expended. And how much we lose is really going to be based on metabolic demands, which makes sense. So again, anywhere from 50 to almost 80% of our body weight is water, depending on our gender, depending on our lean muscle mass. So we can kind of have a general idea to work off from there. And then what you can do is factor in the following, which is that at rest, we do actually make water through metabolic water production, which is when our bodies create water by oxidizing energy-containing substances in our food. And we're able to make about 1 mil per kcal of energy. At rest, though, we also lose water through respiration and our skin, not sweat, but the other one, the transcutaneous one. Mm-hmm. And that accounts for about 5 mil per kcal. So that's a net loss of 0.4 mils per kcals. Sorry, it was not 5 and 1, it was 0.1 and 0.5.
Okay.
So just at rest, that's already a 0.4 mils per kcal of energy lost. And then we, of course, also lose water through our urine, which our kidneys can either concentrate or dilute based on our metabolism and our diet. So an average urine concentration of 600 milliosmoles per liter requires about 0.6 mils of water per kcal. So that comes to a nice even 1 mil per kcal of energy that we lose through water. And this is actually the number that the recommended dietary allowances has been based on from 1945 to 2005.
Huh.
So if you use that 1 mil per kcal and you expend 2,000 kcals per day, which has been a typical reference for nutrient needs, you would need 2,000 mils per day, which is about 64 fluid ounces, which is 8-ounce glasses. And that's where that classic 8 glasses came from. The problem with this is that, again, it's completely metabolism dependent. All of that was based off of resting. It didn't have any sweat factored in. It did not take into account your genetics, your gender, your hormones, your metabolism, your sweat rate, your heat adaptation, your diet, all of the things. So you can't just use that as everybody needs to do this, but it's kind of a good starting point. And also, as a side note, the 64 ounces recommended was never meant to be 64 ounces of water a day. Mm-hmm. It was meant to be 64 ounces of fluid, so coming from water, other drinks, and food. And that's where I kind of wanted to side note just for a second, because this made me think about how there's a lot of influencers on Instagram or whatever in the fitness world that will harp on, like, drink a gallon of water a day. Right. And it's, like, for a lot of different reasons, but they kind of sell, like, drinking this gallon of water as, like, a magic health situation. Mm-hmm. And it irritates me a little bit because they never talk about these other factors. I've never heard any of them talk about, like, also adding minerals to it. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there and caution people that, like, you don't need just tons of plain water. So if you see someone pushing that, you need to kind of look a little bit deeper into it and not just jump on the bandwagon and start chugging a gallon of straight water a day.
So true.
So,
well, and I found a little bit of interesting history also on that whole 8 glasses a day, which seems like it's not necessarily wrong. It's a pretty good average, it sounds like, for folks. But I did find this, which I thought was kind of fascinating. So in 1945, the U.S. Food and Nutrition Board recommended 2.5 liters, around 8 glasses a day of water intake. And that idea really seemed to kind of snowball and never really left our vernacular as in American society. What is, generally left out of that recommendation, and kind of what you were talking about, that at that time it wasn't based on any research.
They just threw it out there.
I mean, I think some doctors had probably done some research, but just the qualifications for research and the process were just not there yet, not the same yet.
Yeah.
And something that is also often forgotten about that recommendation was, at the time, it was stated that most of the water could be consumed from food sources. So I thought that's interesting too.
That part of it got lost somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Did.
I love that.
I know.
I love knowing the history of it. And I did want to say there was no mathematical approach to this, but Dr. Sims in her book has a chapter on hydration, and this is more for women specifically, but I did just want to throw out there that one recommendation she had for women specifically was 0.10 ounces per pound of body weight per hour in temperatures 75 degrees and below, and 0.15 ounces per pound of body weight per hour in temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And do not exceed 25 to 27 ounces of plain water per hour in a temperate environment. So I just wanted to add that because it's kind of a nice, easy number, general number that you could use. Again, she didn't really show how she arrived at that number like this other source did, but she does a lot of research on women specifically, so I might even just put that in the show notes, maybe, just for an easy reference, but...
So talking about how much water we do need daily, I found some information as well. And again, there's so many different sources out there. Maybe best to do your own research, but just kind of interesting. So the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine recommend about 3.7 liters of fluid a day for men and about 2.7 liters of fluid a day for women, which, if you're not into the metric system, that's about 15.5 cups a day for men and about 11.5 cups a day for women, which is higher, kind of a higher recommendation than most that we see, but I thought that was interesting. And of course, that's completely dependent on the individual, as there's a wide variety of factors, such as, like Katy was saying, age, sex, hormone levels can play a role, activity levels, environment, temperature, pregnancy, breastfeeding status, and just overall health can affect all of these things. It's very individualized, I think.
It is, and that's why we're talking a lot today about, body weight and how much we potentially lose and what the different factors are and what the different methods are. Because if you know all of these things, then you can kind of individualize. And one of the most common methods that you're going to see for maybe measuring some of these losses or where your hydration might be at, they fall under the what, which is weight, urine, and thirst. And I think we talked just a little bit about this last time. And in general, I mean, some people may not want to be going this far with trying to measure your hydration levels or whatever. So in general, you can just follow your body's cues. But what seems to be key is kind of a first thing in the morning thing. So if you're waking up thirsty with kind of dark concentrated urine, you might be kind of dehydrated. If you are using the weight, urine, and thirst factors, and you're kind of tracking these in the morning, if your body weight's stable, you're not thirsty, and your urine's pale colored, you're probably well hydrated. So as we said last time, none of these factors on their own are a solid indication, but they do kind of all work together. If you are an athlete or you're out in the heat a lot and hydration is just really important to you and you do want to take it a step further and kind of hone in on that individual loss like we're talking about, you can use these. And so taking these measures first thing in the morning, again, is what's advised. And that's because that is when things have had like a good 6 to 8 hours to kind of equilibrate throughout your body. And so with urine color and urine specific gravity, either of those you can measure in the morning before activity or drinking have an impact. When you exercise, that's going to impact both of these because blood flow is diverted away from your kidneys, so urine volume is going to decrease and fluid may become more concentrated. Also during exercise, your hormones that play a role in fluid regulation are active and they're causing more urine concentration as your kidneys try to hang on to the water. So first thing in the morning, look at urine color and specific gravity. Weight, I think we talked a little bit about this last time, but we'll just expound. So when you're weighing yourself every morning, you're really just looking for stability. We talked about how our normal body water weight is going to fluctuate by plus or minus 1%. So if you're seeing a much larger loss than that 1%, that could be a good indication that you're dehydrated. When it comes to measuring yourself before and after exercise, this can be used. There's kind of a lot of conflict and debate surrounding it. In early exercise physiology, they used to kind of promote this idea of a pints a pound the world round, which was referencing the consuming 2 cups of water for every pound you lose. It does not take into account unique factors that we all have, like whether or not we have a high or low sweat rate, the way that our bodies hold the heat, whether our thirst tends to be muted or we're always thirsty. And again, hormonal fluctuations for women play a huge role. So weighing before and after exercise can help you somewhat maybe get an idea of how much you lose, but it also does not take into account what may still be in your gut or how much water you lost through muscle glycogen and liver glycogen utilization, which you may be very familiar with if you're any sort of athlete.
Definitely, if you're an athlete, you definitely know about that.
But just in case you don't, and because I love it, glycogen is a multi-branch polysaccharide of glucose that serves as an energy source for us. We store it in both our liver and our skeletal muscles. Our muscle glycogen is basically our immediate reserve of glucose for our muscle cells during exercise. It's a very important fuel for us. Our liver is a major store of glycogen, and the glycogen that we store there is an important source of circulating glucose in the post-absorptive state. So when our body requires more energy, our enzymes will break down that glycogen into glucose and send it into our bloodstream. So now you know.
Okay.
And then one more factoid I came across was that research has shown that when a person is out in the heat exercising or working for 4 to 6 hours or even longer in a day, they can lose up to 4 to 5% of their body's water through sweat. And then thirst sensation, there's not a lot to say about that. But again, just like weight and urine, there's a lot of different factors that are going to affect it, including genetics, age, hormones, and a lot of other things. So, what?
You know, I tried to look this up, and I didn't really find an answer, and I'm not sure that there really is an answer besides just common sense one, but it seems like when I'm doing better about hydrating and staying on top of it is that I just crave water more. Whereas if I feel like at times where I'm perhaps a little bit more dehydrated, I'm not always thirsty, and maybe my thirst sensation is a little off kilter, or maybe, I read some things about you can kind of get accustomed to being dehydrated where your body's somewhat used to that. And then when you are becoming more hydrated, it's just going to be so happy that it's just craving more constantly. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. But I guess other people, it seems like, had the same question. So I know I'm not the only one that kind of goes through that feeling. And in general, it seemed to be met with the reaction of like, oh, well, if you're still thirsty after you drink water, you probably have a medical condition, or you're possibly diabetic. And that's not really what I'm describing. It just seems like the more water I drink, the more I crave it, is the simple way to put it. And I just really couldn't quite find an answer for that. But
I have a couple things, but they're more in relation to like exercise and hormones and stuff, and not necessarily just in general whether or not you've been drinking a lot of water.
Right.
But maybe they have similar reasons. I don't know.
Right. And maybe it's just a bit unexplained. And, there's probably not any reason, or there's not a pressing need for an answer to that. But it was kind of nice to see that I wasn't the only one that kind of had that sensation sometimes.
I definitely have that.
It's not a bad one. I think it's a good thing, but it's just interesting.
It is. Our bodies in general are interesting. Like, that was kind of my main takeaway from all this research, was I don't know. I feel like my notes are so detailed right now, but they're still only scraping the surface. Yeah. It's like for everything, I would look up a word, and then it would delve into some complete other body system. And it's like there's 10 more things about that I don't know. And it's just fascinating.
Well, let's talk about some more systems. How about it?
Let's do it.
What's next?
So we keep mentioning different factors that have an impact, and we could talk about some of those, like heat adaptation, kind of what kind of sweaters we are, and then hormones, natural fluid shifts, all of that.
I'm excited. Yes, please.
Okay.
Teach us the stuff.
So heat adaptation is a really big factor that's going to come up when you're looking into any of this, and that's probably very, very important for us as backpackers to know. And I did want to define these really quickly, because you kind of hear like acclimation and acclimatization just interchangeably used, and they are actually a little bit different. And I was happy to learn this because I feel like I always say acclimatization, and I might have been talking about acclimation sometimes. Anyways, acclimation is more of like a synthetic adaptation to a stressor, so like an intentional exposure to stressors to create the adaptation. So I think of like when we go into a sauna or do a cold plunge, or when we have like maybe an intentional schedule of exercising in heat to raise our tolerance. That'd be acclimation. And then acclimatization is a natural one, where like maybe the season has changed and our body is slowly getting used to different temperatures and conditions. So anyways, regardless of which adaptation that you're talking about, the reason that this comes up as a part of this hydration conversation is that they, of course, have an impact on our thermoregulation. So when we become well adapted to heat, our sweat volume is affected, but our body also learns how to hold on to our electrolytes more efficiently. So not only do we lose less water through sweat, but we lose less minerals through sweat, which I thought was pretty cool. The sodium in someone's sweat has like a really gigantic range. Actually, it was between 30 milliequivalents per liter and 120 milliequivalents per liter. There are other solutes in our sweat as well besides just sodium. But before our sweat leaves, it's in what's called our secretory coil. And at that point, it's actually very highly concentrated with solutes, mainly sodium, chloride, potassium, and magnesium. So this is actually kind of like a pre-sweat before our sweat that comes from our plasma. And at that point, it is just as concentrated as the blood, and sometimes even more concentrated. But as it moves up to our skin, our body retains the electrolytes, so that by the time we do actually sweat, it's only about a third of the concentration. And it's also primarily just sodium and chloride at that point, because our bodies hold on to the potassium and the magnesium better. And so how much we lose when we sweat is based, again, on genetic factors, but also that heat adaptation and our personal sweat rate. So the faster we sweat, the less time our body has to conserve electrolytes. A higher sweat rate means that our sweat is more concentrated than a lower sweat rate. An average sodium concentration in sweat is around 50 milliequivalents per liter, which is about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat, which is just 1 gram. Again, if a liter doesn't make that much sense, we're losing a gram of sodium for every 2.2 pounds of body weight that we would lose from fluids. So we don't actually lose as much mineral through sweat as maybe we thought. I thought that we lost a lot more of that. To kind of put that in a point of reference, if we're thinking about getting sodium from salt, only a percentage of salt is sodium. And there's like about 1,150 milligrams of sodium in just a half a teaspoon of table salt. So we're actually losing like less than a half a teaspoon of salt per liter that we sweat out. The reason that I'm talking about all of this, and I feel like it's getting a little bit convoluted, but it's all just tied in together. Heat adaptation affects our sweat, our thermoregulation. And that's important because how much electrolytes and fluid we actually lose in our sweat depends on heat adaptation. And it all just kind of like ties back into how one number doesn't fit all because we're all different. And a big part of the sweat and thermoregulation conversation is also going to be gender, which we are going to talk about. But I just wanted to give like a general numbers so we could try to get a better idea of how much salt we do actually lose when we're sweating.
Yeah.
And so, because it's going to kind of tie back into when we're trying to figure out a hydration strategy for ourselves, how much sodium to include in our electrolytes.
Yeah.
And that number really stood out to me because when I did look at other electrolytes and kind of what the sodium content was, it was like astronomically high numbers compared to what we might actually be needing to try to put back.
That's fascinating.
One more thing to factor in is just that we do have constant natural fluid shifts throughout these compartments that we talked about, throughout our plasma, our cells, and our extracellular spaces. There's a lot of different reasons why these shifts happen. Some are as simple as when we move from sitting to standing or adjust our posture in some way. Also, when we're exercising, we experience something called hemoconcentration, which is where our blood volume is more concentrated because fluid is leaving our blood to go into our muscles and also to leave our bodies through sweat. Our electrolyte balance is also constantly shifting around throughout our body. Sweat has a lower concentration of sodium than our blood does. So the sodium in our plasma will increase in concentration, and that helps to shift fluid into our vasculature. So to try and determine why any of this is important, maybe it really isn't, but there is one method that can kind of help you determine where our fluid is coming from during these natural shifts, and it's called the chloride method. So it estimates how much total body water is coming from each of these spaces, and it has shown that at a lower level of dehydration, like maybe around 2% or less, about a third of this fluid comes from our intracellular spaces and the rest from our extracellular spaces. And then as the dehydration increases, that number kind of levels out to about 50-50. So that kind of makes sense based on our conversation last time about dehydration. Like as it intensifies, kind of all of your body is going to be affected.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about how best to hydrate, these are all kind of factors that we can keep in mind. What are some other things? Like our guts? Because you have a thing that says, let's talk about guts. So.
Really bold in my notes. Well, I did want to talk about guts because
I know
it came up in my notes, especially a lot of Dr. Sim's work, and even just knowing in general. I guess this is another reason why kind of knowing how little sodium we actually lose is important. The majority of water absorption in the bloodstream occurs after the water passes through our stomach and into our small intestines. Our small intestine is where most of the water and solutes are absorbed into our body and then circulated in the form of fluids. The large intestine does play a role. It's more tied to our bowels and digestion, but that's why like, that's why I want to talk about guts, is they do play an essential role in our absorption of both water and electrolytes into our bloodstream. So working with our gut is important to optimize our hydration practices. So one important thing to know is that there's a pressure in our small intestine, and the upper part of our small intestine in particular is very sensitive to pressure changes. So it has an optimal pressure that sits around 200 milliosmoles. And the reason this is important is because it does impact what kind of fluid and solutes we can actually absorb appropriately without disrupting our gut and this pressure level. So for example, a fluid with too high a concentration of carbs, a good example is like in Gatorade or Powerade, will actually raise the pressure in our small intestine, and we can't really absorb that fluid. So if you were to drink a bunch of that, you're just going to feel uncomfortable and sloshy. And then water will actually have to come from other parts of our body to help dilute that carb and the resulting pressure so that we can actually absorb the fluid. On the flip side, just drinking a bunch of plain water, it doesn't really have any sort of solute or concentration in it, like enough of anything to exert any sort of pressure. So our body will actually want to add sodium and glucose to activate absorption. And then water with too high a concentration of sodium can also cause issues because too much sodium will also have to be diluted for absorption. Our body will have to do that, and all of that delays our ability to absorb the fluid. So sodium in ideal amounts is really key. It does activate transport mechanisms for fluid, but balance is everything. Because when we're exercising, blood flow is diverted away from our gut, which that's that hypoxic state that I was talking about. We're under hypoxic and heat stress. So working with our physiology means that we want sodium and glucose in our fluid to activate our fluid transport mechanisms in our small intestines, but we don't want so much that it's going to tip us over that pressure threshold, which I thought was really fascinating. I just had never really come across that before. So with all of that in mind, recommendation that I saw, this one does come from Dr. Sims, was to go for a 1 to 3% carb solution, or about 1 to 3 grams per 100 millimeters of water. She said that you could kind of go with the lower end of that for just your daily hydration, and then the higher end for like exercise hydration. And then the sodium sweet spot was around 100 to 120 milligrams of sodium per liter of water. And then that 360 milligrams per liter was way too high, which is interesting because we do see a lot of products out there that have way more than that. And for a point of reference, there's 300 milligrams of sodium in an 1/8 teaspoon of salt. So a very small amount.
Yeah.
And again, going back to kind of like how little sodium we actually lose in our sweat, a good thing to keep in mind is that we're not actually trying to replace sodium. Our body can afford to lose up to 50% of our sodium stores without us actually being affected. So yeah, we're not trying to replace it. The way that our body transports water from one space to another does use sodium, but it doesn't completely deplete it. So you really don't need like salt tablets or electrolyte tablets or those mixes that have just like huge amounts of sodium in them. So I thought that was interesting because I feel like that's something that's kind of pushed a lot, is like salt tablets, more salt.
Yeah. So as women, what are some things that are unique and specific to our hydration experience? You know, is it really that different than men's?
So, yes, being a woman is definitely a major factor, and I had kind of heard just little hints that it impacts things, but I didn't really know to what extent. And it's probably because hydration guidelines so far have been based on male data, and that's only just now starting to change. So there is some new research looking at the differences. In particular, there's this paper called Sex Differences in the Physiological Adaptations to Heat Acclimation, a state-of-the-art review. It's by Kate Wickham, Philip Wallace, and Stephen Chung, and we'll definitely link it. But a lot of this research has shown that, and we talked a little bit about this, but women have less muscle and more fat in general than men, which means we have less total water in our bodies. And because we have less water available to us, our threshold for thermoregulation is completely different than that of men because we just don't have as much water to offload heat through evaporation and through just that other subcutaneous one that we talked about. Mm-hmm. There was a notable difference in heat tolerance and heat load. Because we sweat less, our core body temperature rises at about twice the rate that men's does when we start exercising. Research showed that when men and women cycled at a 65% VO2, women's core body temperature begins to rise just 30 minutes into the exercise, while men's was not elevated until an hour in. So it also showed that at that point, 30 minutes in, the women sweated out only about 0.5% of their body mass, while the men sweated out up to 3 times that amount at that 1 hour mark. And then another study showed that when men and women experienced the same level of dehydration, about 1.2 to 1.8% during intermittent exercise, the women experienced a rise in core body temperature, while the men did not. Women also have a higher risk of cardiovascular or heat-related stress in the form of a higher heart rate and core body temperature than men do at the same magnitude of dehydration. So, great. When it comes to performance loss for athletes, men can afford to lose up to 3 to 4% of their total body water loss before they experience a noticeable detriment in their performance, while for women it's only 1 to 2%, which I was like, come on, man. After a long endurance session, the men tended to finish with high blood sodium levels, and the women would finish with normal to low blood sodium levels. And then the high hormone phase, and also if you are on the oral contraceptive pill, during that phase, more sodium is actually kicked out and we experience a greater fluid shift out of our plasma into our extracellular space. So we just have less water available for sweating. And this also affects our thirst sensation, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. But our hormones in particular are probably one of the biggest factors, especially during our luteal phase of menstruation when our estrogen and progesterone levels are really high. At this point, we are predisposed to hyponatremia. We lose around 8% of our plasma volume and have a resting rise in our core body temperature of about 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're at increased risk of dehydration, and we have a decrease in our heat tolerance. So everything's working against us here. And this was really interesting to me because our thirst mechanism is driven by plasma osmolality and volume. Our plasma volume is decreased by about 8% at this time, and our thirst sensation is muted because of that. Also, this decreased thirst sensation, I guess, gets worse and worse the older we get. And then our sodium set point is much lower. During the follicular phase of our menstruation, our hormone levels are lower and hydration is just easier because our body temperature is cooler and more stable. During perimenopause and menopause, because the ovulation becomes more irregular and our production of estrogen and progesterone decreases, you might be having heavier flows or hot flashes or night sweats. All of that can increase fluid loss. Again, thirst sensation can become very decreased during this time. And hydration needs just kind of vary throughout that whole phase because there's so much fluctuation going on. And then postmenopausal women have much lower levels of hormones, so they might be more similar to what we are during our follicular phase. So all of that was really interesting to me, and it also was a little bit irritating to me.
Yeah, understandable.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah, I get it.
Just like, geez Louise. But that does the thirst sensation is interesting because it does say that it's driven by like osmolality and volume. So it sort of makes sense if it's driven by like volume.
Right.
That you would be more thirsty when you, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I might be misinterpreting that, but.
Well, that just doesn't seem quite fair though.
It really isn't. I'm like, okay, so we just kind of have all of the things going against us here. Higher risk of having a heart attack or a heat stroke just by virtue of being a woman.
So how should we hydrate? What's our game plan? How do we approach this?
Did you come across some good things?
Well, just like we're talking about, trying to be aware of what our needs are and why and when electrolytes are important, things like that. So it seems like the rule of thumb is that In general, water is perfect hydration, just plain water if you're doing light exercise or less. If you exercise strenuously for more than 2 hours, sweat, that's probably when you're going to want to consider an electrolyte beverage. But I would say that not everyone just needs electrolytes constantly in their everyday life if they have a pretty typical diet. It's really that high exertion and high heat type situations where electrolytes are really going to be beneficial, I feel like. I did find an interesting study conducted by researchers at Scotland St. Andrews University, and they tested beverages for what is most hydrating for humans, and the number one most hydrating beverage, and this kind of surprised me, but I found this in a variety of studies, and that is milk, specifically skim milk. Following behind skim milk, most hydrating beverages include oral rehydration solutions, not sports drinks, but things like liquid IV and those types of hydration solutions. Following that is full fat milk, then orange juice, colas, diet colas, cold teas, hot teas, sports drinks, followed by still water, and then sparkling water. Lagers are just barely behind water in hydration ability, and then finally coffee.
Wow.
So as Katie's been explaining to us, hydration involves not just fluid balances, but also retention, meaning the beverage's benefits aren't quickly lost to urination. So nutrients in milk, like fat, lactose, also known as milk sugar, sodium, these all contribute to this beverage's ability to stay in the body longer and thus provide more hydration. Electrolytes like sodium and potassium obviously contribute to better hydration, while calories in beverages result in slower gastric emptying and therefore slower release of urination. So the beverages that we're drinking while we're eating are actually going to be absorbed more slowly, which is generally a good thing. And it's kind of like what we talked about in our last episode of maybe to avoid chugging. It's just going to shoot right through you. And food can kind of help prevent that as well. Your body during digestion will kind of shift its attention to digesting food and less on water, which is kind of interesting. Fruit juices and colas, I thought it was kind of fascinating that they were more hydrating than water, but that is in fact only true in the first 4 hours after ingestion. After that time period, these high sugar type beverages don't hydrate as well because of these high concentrations of sugar. When all of that sugar gets to enter the small intestine, water is pulled out of the rest of the body to help dilute the sugar and digest it, and that in itself can result in dehydration long term. I was surprised by how hydrating coffee and teas are found to be, even more so than water. Coffee and tea can have a diuretic effect. We're going to want to be aware of is that it can pull water from our body. It's generally recommended that any more than 2 to 4 cups of coffee a day is probably too much and will begin to become dehydrating. I also found it interesting that they found in this study that adding a little bit of milk or coffee to your tea, or adding a little bit of milk to your tea or coffee, can offset the diuretic qualities, because again, your body's going to be focusing on digesting and using those nutrients instead of just processing the liquid.
This whole study, I feel like it's a lot of stuff that I feel like other people try to tell you no on.
Right. It turns out coffee's really not that bad, especially if you add a little dairy to it.
Good news, everyone.
Yeah, I know. Beer really wasn't that much less hydrating than water, a tiny little bit. The reason for that is that alcohol does act as a diuretic, causing you to pass more urine. So when it comes to alcoholic beverages, hydration will depend a lot on the beverage's total volume. So stronger alcoholic drinks will dehydrate, where more diluted alcoholic drinks like beers and lagers will not. And so, again, that equated to lager just not being significantly less hydrating than water, which is fascinating. But I think that there's other probably good reasons to maybe avoid alcohol on the trail. Maybe it's not super dehydrating unless you're just drinking straight liquor. Anyway, that kind of sums up that study, but I just thought, I don't know, I was pretty surprised by some of the things that made it on the list higher than others.
Me too. The milk is very surprising, but I feel like it actually kind of makes sense in a way. And I definitely have had moments where I just randomly feel like I need to chug milk, and now I'm wondering if I was a little dehydrated or something.
There's a lot of good stuff in milk, and that result, I couldn't find all of these results replicated, but the milk thing has been replicated many times over. The Dairy Council is very proud of themselves.
Oh, good job, guys.
Yeah.
I feel like milk is kind of needlessly demonized.
Agree. I realize not everybody digests it well.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan occasionally.
I am too.
So I don't know how that really works when it comes to backpacking and dehydrated milk. I feel like it's probably similar. I feel like dehydrated foods probably don't contain as many nutrients as their undehydrated version, but it kind of encourages me to maybe bring powdered milk along and add to my coffee, and maybe add a little bit more to my meals and dishes and things like that.
That's interesting. That's a good idea. And I like simple ones like that can be, because that's something like, I have some more that I'll go into, but then I think we should definitely try to talk about application for backpacking and hiking, because that's mainly what we are, a backpacking podcast, right?
I think so. It can be whatever we want it to be.
I did all these notes and then I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think you even talked about backpacking at all.
Well, it's all relevant. Can we talk about coconut water for just a second? Is this the time?
We can.
So, coconut water is my electrolyte of choice in general. When on trail, I use a dehydrated coconut water powder that has aquamin added to it, which is marine-based calcium minerals that they add to the coconut, and just to kind of up the electrolytes and whatnot. I find it personally pretty tasty. But I personally do add salt to my coconut water for a couple reasons. The most important of which is to add that sodium in, because coconut water in and of itself cannot adequately replenish your electrolytes after heavy workouts, since it doesn't contain that sodium. But it is an option to add it, like I said, and that is what I like to do. I will say also that I really enjoy adding a little bit of salt into my coconut waters. It just almost makes it like ocean-y somehow. I don't know. It's delicious though. I enjoy it.
I copied you and it was really delicious. I do think I gave the teaser last time that I was going to talk about like the history of coconut water becoming a hydration thing. And so to nutshell it, in the early 1950s, there was this group of medical staff that went to Samoa, and dysentery was a big deal there, so they ended up running out of their rehydrating saline solution, and then they also got dysentery themselves. And they did know that coconut water had like really good potassium levels and that it had some glucose in it. And they were really readily available there because they're a staple food in Samoa. So they actually IV tapped the coconut to rehydrate themselves enough to kind of get themselves home.
Wow.
And then they wrote about it in the Annals of Emergency Medicine, so the information got out there. And so then there was this huge surge of coconut water in the 1970s. It was all the rage, kind of tapered off, but then returned full force. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that came from. And as Sam said, they don't really have the sodium, but they do have really good potassium levels. And I did actually look this up real quickly just for comparison. Based on the research, mainly of Dr. Sims, what she found was like a good hydration solution would look like about 7 to 9 grams of carb per 8 ounces of water. And in that same ounces of water, about 7 to 9 grams of sugars from glucose and sucrose, about 180 to 225 milligrams of sodium, and about 60 to 7 milligrams of potassium. So, with that in mind, I did look up these coconut water and Aquaman electrolytes. Mm-hmm. So, good news. In these electrolytes per 8-ounce serving of water, there's only 5 milligrams of sodium, which is no surprise. We knew it was low. But there's 10 grams of carb, and there's 9 grams of sugar. There's 312 milligrams of potassium, 10 milligrams of magnesium, and 130 milligrams of calcium. So if we add the sodium in to make it like in that range, we would only need like a 16th to an 8th teaspoon of salt. So like not very much at all, probably what you've been putting in it. The carbs only about a gram higher. The potassium is quite a bit higher, which is probably why it does feel so restorative. The sugar does come from glucose and sucrose, which actually breaks back down into both glucose and fructose, which are glucose and sucrose are the most recommended, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. And then I don't know if this was important. This is probably just my brain being stupid, but I was trying to find out like what the sugar that comes from the actual coconut is, and all I could find was coconut sugar, which is not really made from the fruit itself, but from like the sap or the flour. But I assume it's the same. Yeah. So there you go. It's actually quite excellent with the salt added.
Hey, well, that's exciting because it's flippin' delicious and it feels restorative. And I did never really know if that was just in my mind or not, but it sounds like it's not just in my mind.
I don't think it's in your head at all. I think it's real.
I rather enjoy it.
Oh. So I'm going to dive in and blaze through a few things that I read, a few recommendations. Mm-hmm. Some of it might kind of reiterate what you said. So hydration strategies are going to be really different depending on the level of activity. So as Sam said, for just, normal daily life, you probably just need plain water. The key is that you just don't need a large quantity drink over a short amount of time. So the sip, sip, sip is key. And a new definition comes along with this. You may or may not have heard. The reason you don't want to just drink huge quantities of plain water in a short amount of time is because we have these baroreceptors in our body, which are specialized sensory neurons, and they get very excited by the stretching of our blood vessels.
Oh boy.
So we have 2 types, high pressure and low pressure. We're only talking about low pressure with hydration. So low pressure baroreceptors might also just be called volume receptors. And again, they're stimulated by the stretching of our blood vessel walls. And they will give us information about our blood volume and changes of pressure within our circulatory system. So when our blood pressure increases, they're going to generate increased action potentials, which are transmitted to our central nervous system. And then the information is used in autonomic reflexes. So to bring it all back to the conversation at hand, our low pressure baroreceptors are stimulated when we just chug a bunch of plain water, and their response is to make us pee way more than we absorb. So this, I said like eons ago that we would talk about why I pee so much. And it does come back down to like, when you are drinking plain water, you need to be sipping it continuously over the day instead of like waiting till you're thirsty and then chugging a bunch. And I think that's why I have been guilty of just peeing way too much throughout the days, because I know water's important and I'm trying to drink enough of it based on all this different information that I've had come at me throughout the years. But I didn't quite grasp the sip, sip, sip thing over the chug with reckless abandon.
Well, nobody talks about that.
Nobody really
talks
don't.
About the importance of sipping and how chugging is basically useless. I mean, it's pointless.
Yeah.
So they need to spread that with the message, you know what I'm saying? I guess we're trying. I don't know who they is. We're trying.
The powers that be.
Sip your water. Don't chug it.
So, in an interview on a podcast Dr. Sims did, he just kind of asked her for like a general strategy. I'm getting ready to go out and do like a low intensity exercise. What do I do? And her recommendation was like about an hour before the activity to mix a teaspoon of maple syrup and 1/16 teaspoon of salt with 500 milliliters of water, which is about half a liter or around 2 cups. And then just sip on that over an hour leading up to your exercise, and you should be fine. That was for low intensity exercise. Or I'm sorry, that was for a higher intensity exercise. Like if you're going to go do kind of a higher intensity workout or maybe like go for a run. For lower like resistance trainings, she said you're probably fine with just plain water in general. Again, the sipping, because you're just not having as much of that like hypoxic response or that blood going away from our gut. So it's able to handle a little bit more pressure change. She did say that like if you're doing light exercise but you're outside, the environment might change that a little bit. So if it's like a dry, cool environment but you're at a higher altitude, you should probably add in some sodium, because I guess you will actually lose more sodium when you're at a higher altitude.
Higher altitude you're more likely to become dehydrated.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I read that as well. And less likely to feel thirsty in higher altitudes as well.
Oh, great. I love it when that happens.
Yeah. So it's just quite dangerous all around.
If it's that cooler weather but you're at sea level, you probably don't need salt. This should be kind of a no-brainer at this point, but if you're in heat or humidity, you probably need both the sodium and a little bit of glucose, because everything's just harder when it's hot. And then as far as actually drinking, whether or not to drink anything during the exercise, I think you said this, but if it's like longer than 2 hours, you might need a little more. So like for less than 2 hours, just that very simple solution that she gave is fine. For a longer endurance session, you would need to maybe add a little more carb. So maybe more like 3 grams per 100 mils of water, and then maybe add on the higher end of the sodium range that she gave, which I feel like I said a million years ago, but it was 1 to 3 grams of carb per 100 milliliters of water and around 100 to 120 milligrams of sodium per liter of water. So that's kind of the range I'm talking about.
Cool. I hope you guys can do the math, because that's pretty fascinating, really. I don't know. Kind of interested to try to figure out some numbers for myself.
I will say I did personally test out the solution, and first of all, it's delicious. You can't even taste the salt, and it's like not super sweet. It just has like the tiniest hint of maple flavor.
I love maple.
And so I did try it out. I like sipped it over the hour leading up to when I went and did a pretty intense workout, and I mean, I felt hydrated. I couldn't really speak to my performance, but I felt good. I felt like I did a good job, so...
Reviews are in. So far, so good.
So I did just want to talk a little bit on why there's such an emphasis on sodium and potassium, and why we also need carbs to absorb our fluids, just the science side of it. So sodium, we've been harping on a lot, but it is because it's critical for fluid absorption. I think Sam just said this, but it pulls fluid in and circulates it. It moves it from our gut to our plasma. And I did want to reiterate again, because I think sometimes people hear sodium and salt and they use them kind of interchangeably. I think I maybe thought that in my mind a little bit, but regular table salt is only about 40% sodium, and then the rest is chloride. So they're not the same thing, but salt is probably where we are getting our sodium. And then a lot of the drinks are going to include potassium because, again, it's kind of restorative. It's really important post-exercise once our blood is back to circulating in the normal way. It really helps us rehydrate all spaces of the body, so it is really important. But also sodium and potassium are really good at working together to help with the process of pumping water out of spaces. The only difference here, and the reason why we don't need as much potassium, is that it isn't depleted during that process like sodium is.
Okay.
So that's why we focus mainly on those two. It's not to say the other ones aren't important, like the calcium and the magnesium. It's just that we get all we need from food when it comes to those, and we just don't lose as much. Carbs, the reason that we need them has to do with the way that fluid is absorbed in our small intestine, and with our sodium and glucose uptake mechanism and our fructose uptake mechanism. So when we use a little bit of carb, we're going to activate more of these fluid uptake mechanisms across our small intestines to get fluid into our plasma. So sodium by itself is not going to activate all of those, because the body would have to supply the glucose itself, and that's fine during rest or light resistance training. But when we're doing cardio or exerting ourselves in a hot environment or for longer periods of time, blood is diverted away from the small intestine to our working tissues and to our skin to offload heat. So this is when we want some glucose and some sucrose, which, as I said, also breaks down into more glucose and some fructose. So all of those together just activate like all of the systems, from what I read.
Super.
So, and then I did just want to say, like, I said milk is demonized, but I feel like carbs and sugar are demonized even worse.
Right.
So I think a lot of people are maybe scared and maybe even look for electrolytes that don't have sugar in them. And I just wanted to caution you against that a little bit. Of course, if you're diabetic, like, you need to follow your own information. But in general, if you're someone who's just like counting calories or something, the light or low calorie sports drinks options, they tend to have sugar substitutes that are sugar alcohols. I can't speak, but these are all the tols, like the sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol, and they pull water out of the blood and into the GI tract. These ingredients are also strongly linked to GI distress, and they're actually commonly used as laxatives, which seems like something we would not want when we're exercising.
Oh, yeah.
Especially backpacking. The other sugar substitutes like sucralose can cause your blood sugar to crash because our body senses the sweetness and it releases insulin in anticipation of the sugar that it thinks is coming. But since there's not actually any sugar, our existing blood glucose will get taken instead, which causes a drop in our blood glucose and a bit of hypoglycemia. And it also creates a nasty cycle because our body will be signaled to release more glucose into our blood, which causes more insulin to be released, and so on and so on. So it's something to keep in mind. During exercise, insulin isn't as important in our blood sugar control, but ingesting sucralose can make our blood sugar tank more quickly, which will increase our need for more carbs, and we basically are just going to crash and upset our gut in the process. So I thought that was interesting because I do feel like sometimes we're trying to watch, we are scared of sugar and carbs, but when it comes to this hydration stuff, like, you do need it, and you should just remember that it's not being stored. Your body's using it, and in fact really needs it to do what it needs to do. So don't be scared.
Do you feel like there's any sugar alternatives that are worthwhile?
I don't know. I feel like I don't know enough, and I do have a natural distrust for sugar substitutes, to be honest. Like,
same.
I tend to use like pure cane sugar, coconut sugar. Rapadura was a thing way back in the day, but I haven't used that in years. But I do tend towards like more natural things like those, or even just using like maple syrup or honey. But I kind of tend to stay away from them in general, so I don't know.
Same.
I can't really be helpful there, and I don't want, I don't know anything about diabetics' needs and what a good hydration solution would look like for them. That's not going to mess with their blood sugar. So
yeah.
That would be an interesting thing to look into.
Sugar substitutes. I've never been a big fan, and I've always tended to feel more comfortable just using an ingredient that is natural, and sugar is. Of course, some is more processed than others, but I've never been a big fan of the alternatives, but I think they taste weird, to be honest, so that's maybe part of it, too.
Same. I feel like erythritols and stevia.
Yeah.
I don't mind stevia in some things. I feel like erythritol is in everything, and I don't know. And like, I've looked some of these up, and they're essentially just chemical compounds. And in some applications, I don't feel like they would maybe be a big deal. But in in this context, our body does get confused because it thinks it's sugar and it responds like it thinks it needs to. I didn't really think about that before. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
And that might not be a big deal at home, but if you're on trail, I feel like the last thing you want is to have something in your electrolyte that's going to give you diarrhea.
Yes. No, thank you.
So.
Are we still recording?
Yeah, I didn't pause, I don't think.
Okay, well, we're back. We had to take a little break. All this hydration discussion and practice while recording. We had to put some of our I had to put some of my processes to work. Thank you, physical self.
I hope you guys are still with us because we're only just now moving on to the practical application. Lord help us.
Hang in there, guys.
So I did just want to say...
Whatever. They're like on the edges of their seat waiting for us to continue
This is the most fascinating thing. I mean, I was when I was listening to other people's stuff, but...
Same. Okay. We're back to it, guys.
So I did want to say that this section, these things I'm going to talk about, this is kind of specific to athletes. So if you're just kind of thinking about day-to-day hydration, you can ignore this. But as far as hydration strategies for athletes, a good thing to remember is that what we're trying to do is not stay completely hydrated during the activity, because that's kind of impossible. We're just trying to slow the rate of the water loss. So we've talked a lot about how our body works, like why we want sodium and glucose and all of that. And we went over this, but I'm going to say again, you want to look for, per 8 ounces of water, about 7 to 9-ish grams of carb, 7 to 9 grams of sugar coming from glucose and or sucrose. You want your sodium to be about 180 to 225 milligrams. Potassium about 60 to 75 milligrams. Some decent options on the market that kind of hit those are Osmo Hydration, Scratch Labs, Cliff Shot, Goo Hydration Drink Mix, and Bonk Breaker.
Bonk.
Which I've never heard of, but I really like that name.
I haven't really heard of very many of those.
I think I've heard of Goo, but not the hydration. I thought they just made those gels and the Stroop waffles. Oh. So to compare this to a sports drink like Gatorade, Powerade, Tailwind, Vitamin Water, I feel like we're all kind of familiar with those. They tend to have more like 12 to 9 grams per 8 ounces of water. Their sugars tend to come from maltodextrin, fructose, and sucrose. And their sodium levels are usually around 52 to 110 milligrams per 8 ounces. So those are like sports drinks. And another thing, we talked about osmoality like 10 years ago in this episode. And the normal range, I can't really remember it off the top of my head, but wasn't it around like 200 something?
I think so.
So in these drinks, the osmolality is more like 300 to 305 milliosmoles. Wow. Which I was like, okay, I don't totally understand what that means.
Yeah.
Even now, after all this, but... So that's sports drinks. In comparison to some other electrolytes that you might see, a lot of people recommend Element. And so their packets mix with 16 ounces of water, but if you cut that in half, they have about 500 milligrams of sodium, 100 milligrams of potassium, 30 milligrams of magnesium, and they have less than a gram of carb and barely any, like basically no sugar. So they're kind of all off based off of what we said. The sodium level is about twice what it needs to be. The potassium is fine, but the carb and sugar are almost non-existent. And if we're exercising, we do need those. Nun tablets are another one. They're actually pretty decent. The sodium's about 300 milligrams per 16 ounces, so cut it in half. Potassium 150 milligrams, magnesium 25 milligrams. Carb 4 grams and sugar 1 gram. So the sodium and potassium are pretty spot on, but the carb and sugar, again, is kind of low for exercising. So I think these would be okay, and we didn't really talk about this. Like, we did mention that over a full long day, you could lose like 3 to 5% of your body water. As long as you have like ample access to like beverages and foods that rehydrate you, you usually make that back within like a 24-hour period. It's not immediate, but as long as you have access to those things, you're gonna be okay. I do think that might be a little harder on trail, just because we don't have as much. I guess take that for what it's worth.
It's interesting. I do use Nun tablets as well sometimes. I do enjoy them. I am glad to see that they're pretty good.
Yeah.
I actually bought the ones, and this is probably not that great, but I'm a caffeine addict. So the ones that I have a very small amount of caffeine, which I personally enjoy.
I feel like that would be great on trail.
It's just a little bit. It's a tiny little boost. It's not as much as a cup of coffee or anything. So I do like those, but I was kind of curious on the sugar in them, and I'm honestly not sure. So now I'm going to have to go home and read some labels if they use an additional sweetener.
Yeah.
They're very mild.
Some.
They're not nearly as sweet as like a Gatorade or something. It's a very mild, soft kind of flavor. And I am a fan, but I will say like they do have coloring in them too.
Yeah.
So that's another, I'm not really sure why they feel the need to do that, but they're pretty.
They were pretty. Yeah. I actually think I have some. I'm going to grab them.
They're not terrible.
They don't have the caffeine in them. Might as well.
They're handy, and I do use them now sometimes at work too for like a small caffeine boost sometimes without having to drink coffee.
Oh, it says beet juice for color.
Oh, cool. Well, maybe. Oh, they have stevia.
So I wonder if stevia is glucose or sucrose or...
I don't know.
Dang it, you guys.
I still
20 pages of notes and I didn't look.
I still feel better about it being like a natural source of a sweetener though. I guess that's why like I'm not a huge fan of stevia, but I can appreciate it. And I also love that they're using natural coloring, and I can't believe I haven't looked at these before, so yay.
That's cool.
Very cool.
I mean, beets are a great natural coloring.
I'm kind of like just that much more of a fan of these Nun products as of this moment.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as what I've tried, I think the coconut water ones with added salt and these are pretty great because, again, they don't have as much carbon sugar as you might need, but as long as you know that, you could probably just take a snack that has carb, right? You know?
Gotta eat a snack.
I'm sorry, Sam. I hate that.
Something a little sweet, a little salty. Shucks.
So for athletes... For, like, the type of athlete that's got an event coming up, a big race, a bicycle race. As far as I'm concerned, backpacking is an endurance sport. I do think that the duration of it, like, I do think we expend quite a bit of energy. And so I would include a backpacking trip in this umbrella.
Absolutely.
There is a pre-hydrating strategy. This is going to sound like so much sodium because we've just talked about how we don't need that much, but this is pre-hydrating. Like, so... Starting the night before a big event, you can hyperhydrate by drinking sodium-rich fluids like chicken broth or miso soup. I really liked this recommendation because the other thing about backpacking is that essentially every day is one of these events. So remember how you brought the miso and we drank it that one night and it was like the best thing ever?
Yeah, and it was cheap.
Yeah.
Cheapo miso.
I feel like we can just... cheapo miso. We can hyperhydrate with cheapo miso. Like,
I love that.
If not every night, like maybe every other night would be good.
Yeah.
Like, that really stood out to me as something that could be like a great application for backpackers.
Something to look for. I mean, I like me some even cheapo miso too.
Yeah.
So.
I love miso everything. There are pre-hydration beverages on the market that will help you pull fluid back into your bloodstream by giving you a bunch of sodium. One of them is an Osmo Preload. This one in particular is a women's mix. It's 1.5% solution with 1,500 milligrams of sodium per 8 ounces. There's another product called The Right Stuff. Or you can make your own because you can order sodium citrate and sodium chloride online. And you can make a solution with 7.7 grams of sodium citrate and 4.5 grams of sodium chloride per liter of water. I think I'd prefer miso soup, but it's an option. And then she said you could also drink a large bottle of a low carbohydrate hydration drink. By low carb, she means 9 grams or less per 8 ounces for every hour you're out exercising in the elements. So yeah, that's just a pre-hydration strategy that was taken from Dr. Stacy Sims.
I'm going to have to look up Dr. Sims.
Dude, you're going to love her.
Yeah.
She was kind of a marathoner herself, and she had just kind of this experience where she was doing everything right, she thought, for her hydration, but she was just bonking. And she ended up kind of like talking to a bunch of other women who were having the same experience. And one thing she noticed right off the bat was that they were all on the same hormonal phase of their cycle. And so she actually at that time I think was trying to figure out what she wanted to write her thesis on, and that became it. So she's done like so much research for not just hydration but just like nutritional strategies in general for like female athletes that work with our physiology instead of against it, and it's so good.
I can't wait to look her up.
Really, I wanted to do that thing where all of my notes become me fangirling over one specific person, but I tried really hard not to do that.
Sometimes I feel like we're asking like very specific questions, and they're not always easy to find like specific answers to, like in context of backpacking or the outdoor world. So when we do find like one researcher that's really kind of, and maybe it's not just backpacking, but really it's kind of hit that sweet spot that we're looking to, we can't help but kind of like fangirl, because it's like, oh, the one person that has like asked this question and dug into it and actually has done the research. And I don't know, it's exciting.
It is. I love it. I'm glad that we're finally getting some like woman focused research too.
Same.
All right, so where are we at here?
During exercise, I think, or getting there.
Okay, so I got myself out of order because we actually kind of talked about during exercise already, which is when we do want some of those electrolytes. We do want that sodium and that glucose.
Right.
And then the other just most important thing, we said it already, but it's the sip, sip, sip situation rather than chugging it all at once. There is a caveat to that, though, which kind of has to do with... So that's kind of the drink to thirst versus timing your drinking, like scheduling your drinking situation. And so in general, you do want to sip over the entire day because of those baroreceptors and our need to pee if we get too excited. But there are different times for different strategies. This information is also taken from Dr. Sims from her book, which I will link. So she was saying that you could drink to thirst during exercise if any of the following factors are present. So if you are a woman in the high hormone phase of your cycle, or you're on the progestin-only mini pill, if you've pre-hydrated prior to your race, hike, whatever, if you are heat acclimated, if you are adequately trained, and if you have a history of exercise-related hyponatremia. And then she also added on, or have syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone secretion, which I did not look up, but I feel like the name in itself is just kind of tells what it is. Mm-hmm. And then she recommended drinking on a schedule during exercise if you're a junior athlete and have not gone through puberty yet, if you have had 2 or more heavy training sessions in a day, if you are not heat acclimated and or are training at higher altitudes, and if you have a history of heat illness. So the major thing that stands out about this, like drinking to thirst, sip, sip, sip versus scheduling it, is that the duration of exercise is going to have a huge impact on this. So if you are running a marathon or competing in an event that lasts for up to 6 hours, or you like day hiking, you could just use the drink to thirst method. But anything beyond that, and you should schedule your hydration, because there are biomechanical changes that your body will go through that have an impact on your perception of thirst. Which I was like, what? I'm not really sure where a long, tough day of hiking would fall into that spectrum. I'm trying to think about like some of our longest days of hiking. Mm-hmm. And I do kind of feel like naturally I hydrate better during the first part of the day and it falls off towards the end. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of just equated it with like being tired and kind of over it. But maybe a long day of backpacking is falling under that like point where our body is actually changing.
I would say it could, depending on the hike and such.
I thought that was super interesting. And then after our hike, protein is actually really helpful with fluid recovery across our whole body. We basically need some protein and some carbs. A good hit of protein within 30 minutes of exercise is important for that glycogen recovery that we talked about. You could have a protein shake. She recommended Greek non-fat yogurt because it has protein, potassium, magnesium, all the goodies. And the only reason that it was non-fat in this instance was because fat is just slower to absorb. So non-fat's actually a little bit better in this situation. And then you can just move on to getting your hydration through real food. So,
well, and I want to touch on that because like we talked about much earlier in the episode, originally when kind of this recommendation of 8 8-ounce glasses a day of water, this total amount that we're supposed to be drinking every day. Well, originally that included water that we would get from food. So I wanted to talk just for a minute about what some of the most hydrating foods are. Yay. Of course, you're not going to be able to take all of this on trail with you, but it turns out you can get a pretty significant amount of your fluids from food if you so choose to do so. So I'm just going to run through some of these that are, well, all of these foods are over 90% of makeup of water. So the number one highest water content or fruit or vegetable is the cucumber at 96%, followed by iceberg lettuce, 96%. Not high on the nutrients, but it does have a lot of water. Celery, 95%. Radishes, also 95%. Romaine lettuce, going to have a little bit more nutrients as well. Tomatoes at 94%. Zucchini and other summer squashes are also 94% water. Asparagus, 92%. Also bell peppers, cabbage, cauliflower. Mushrooms are also 92% water. Spinach, strawberries, 92% water, and watermelon is also 92% water. So there's a lot of good fresh produce options that are really probably going to help you stay hydrated if you choose to enjoy them often.
That list just makes me think we all must be way better hydrated in the summer.
Yeah, if you like your produce, and then some people really don't though. So
true.
And again, most of this isn't necessarily going to be things that you drag out on trail with you. If this is something that kind of piques your interest, you might do a little bit of research on your own. There's a lot of stuff out there. Some foods are going to retain and deliver more water left raw. And then other foods like summer squashes and zucchinis will actually deliver more water to your system if you cook them first, which I thought was interesting as well. Which I don't know. I don't eat raw zucchini very often anyway, but
yeah,
it kind of tends to tear my tummy up. I don't know if it's just too fibrous or what, but I kind of need to cook it. But lots of good foods out there that can help us stay hydrated as well.
So what do you think our best options are on trail? Because another part of this is just we don't have as much, but a lot of what we do have is probably... I mean, I do think we probably carry a lot of salty snacks.
We do.
And, but we do have a lot of dehydrated food. Like you said, they probably don't have as many nutrients. I've wondered about doing one of those athletic green powders, but I never have. I don't know if it's necessary.
Some people really believe in those things, and then some people really don't. And I'm not quite sure what I think about them, to be honest. I do want to mention also, though, that if you are taking dehydrated fruits, veggies, meals out on trail with you, and unless you're rehydrating them in your bowl or whatever first, I love dehydrated fruits, and that's kind of a go-to snack for me. But that fruit will reconstitute in your body with the water, the fluid that's already in your stomach. So it is kind of taking away from your overall water input.
That's a good point.
So if you are eating a lot of dried foods without rehydrating them before ingesting them, that's going to use up more water in your system. It's going to absorb, that food's going to absorb water, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but you probably might want to account for that if you are really watching your intake on trail. If you're eating a lot of dehydrated stuff, you probably want to drink some extra water.
That's a really good point. Backpacking specific. I love it.
Yeah. We've been talking about a lot of beverages and foods that hydrate us, but something that you haven't heard us mention a lot so far is a sports drink like Gatorade.
Gatorade, if you remember back to our gut and how we don't want super high concentration of carbs, that's one aspect. Gatorade is really high in carbs. I do have a little history here.
Way too much sugar, right?
A lot of
way
sugar.
More than we need.
Yes.
Practically, okay.
And not enough sodium.
Right.
So it's
it's kind of a terrible drink.
It kind of is, and it's a little bit sad because I don't think it used to be. From what I read in the 60s, there was a a Florida Gators assistant coach who basically was just noticing issues with the players not staying hydrated and having like all kinds of related issues like kidney stones. So they were really not hydrated.
Oof, yeah.
And his roommate happened to be a renal physiologist. So he was kind of talking to him about this. And his roommate told him to just add a little glucose and salt in the water, which is what we need. And that's how it started. So he did that. And the athletes, of course, saw a major improvement. And not only were like not suffering the ailments that they had been, but actually had like a huge, an increase in their performance.
Yeah.
So they just continued to like research it, develop it, promote it. And eventually, after a few years, it was bought by Quaker Oats. And so up to that point, it was like kind of that good mix. It was a good hydration solution.
Okay.
But around the same time that it was bought by Quaker Oats, the FDA decided to take this artificial sweetener off the market because they decided that it wasn't safe. And that was the sweetener that had been used in like the original Gatorade. Mm-hmm. So around this time, they changed the formula, but they ended up just completely changing it. Like they added way more carbohydrate to it because also at that time, a lot of the science was coming out about like carbs in performance.
Yeah.
From the nutritional aspect. So it really became more of like a performance drink than a hydration one at that point.
Okay.
From what I could tell, is kind of what happened to it. So yeah, the one that's on the market now is like way too much carb, too much sugar, and just like not enough sodium. So it's probably okay for people who are using it as like a performance. I still think there's way better options, but for hydration, it's not great for us.
Yeah, that study out of St. Andrews University actually ranked sodas higher than Gatorades and things.
That's saying
I know, that's pretty terrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I will say that one of Dr. Sim's kind of like catchphrases was, what was it? Hydration in the bottle, food in the pocket, which kind of goes along with Gatorade, like not being a good hydration, because our hydration needs are actually pretty simple, but that's not to discount like how much we do get from our food and do need from our food. So I thought that was a good little thing to remember, because a lot of interviews that I listened to with her, people were asking her about like some of the drink mixes that are more both, so they do have a bunch of stuff in it, or even like the goos that people eat, or some of the kind of like more artificial foods that people eat for athletic things. And she was really not a proponent of that. She was like, your hydration goes in the bottle and your food goes in the pocket, and it should be real food, which I can kind of get behind because that tends to be what I believe anyway. So
same.
Maybe she's just an echo chamber for me, but
no, I kind of tend to agree, and I'm not a huge fan of all the super processed stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna say there's not a time and place, but in general, I prefer like real food. You know, real food. Like, I guess food is food, but from the earth a bit more, perhaps, is what I'm trying to say. So, something that kind of sparked my curiosity after working on the previous episode on dehydration, which, by the way, I've been like obsessed with hydrating myself ever since that episode, and I've just been giving it a lot of thought. But I just was kind of curious about how long it generally takes a person to become rehydrated once they begin that process of ingesting fluids. So actual rehydration begins in just as little as 5 to 15 minutes. And in fact, you can start to feel better just almost immediately, but your body can start recovering within 15 minutes. True dehydration will take longer, especially if it's moderate to severe, and in that case, you probably want to go to the hospital or to the doctor. A hardcore case of dehydration with proper treatment, symptoms should rescind within a couple of days.
Okay.
So it doesn't take too long.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I will now just throw out some very practical tips to how to stay hydrated on trail, and a lot of this is just going to be reiterating what Katy's already talked about. But specifically, how to stay hydrated on trail A great way to start that process is just to hydrate before getting on trail, which Katy talked about at pretty good length here, but to not start your adventure behind on fluids, that's not gonna go well for you. Make your water and your snacks easily accessible. If it's something that's really hard to get to, you're less likely to do so. I like to use a water bladder.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't, but I find that it makes that sipping super easy and almost mindless.
Yeah. It's like instinctual kind of.
I go through water pretty quickly that way without really thinking about it. In fact, I kind of have to watch myself a little bit.
True.
Something else you might want to try is, well, I wouldn't say might. I would say definitely do one or the other, is if you're going to be exposed to sun, to use sun protection, whether that's SPF or clothing. As we learned last week, sunburns can lead to dehydration and just also aren't very fun. It's recommended, maybe to drink water before feeling fully thirsty, especially on trail. I feel like my thirst sensation when I'm on trail is a little bit different than at home, so I just try to stay on top of it.
Yeah, me too.
Be preventative. It is recommended to avoid alcohol before and during your trip. And we talked about why beer maybe isn't the worst option, but it isn't, all alcohol is a diuretic. It's not good for your body, and you're probably not going to be in the ideal hydrated state if you've drank a bunch of booze before you hit the trail or while you're on trail.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Hydrating after trail is also super important. Some folks like to drink a good portion of their water while they're stopped and to collect water. I don't know how I feel about that though, because as we've learned, it's best not to chug your water. So I'm not sure what I think about just chugging all your water at your water sources. I could see drinking some, maybe a little extra there. So I don't know about that one, folks, but I know a lot of y'all do it. Some folks don't really carry water at all. They just chug at water sources.
I don't know. I would be very curious to see a study on the hydration levels of backpackers, of through hikers maybe specifically. I feel like there'd be a lot of dehydrated backpackers out there.
I can't wait to see all the research that you do someday.
There's gotta be. I did say, I think last time we were I wonder what this number is. So I did remember to look it up and it got buried. But according to the lay press, around 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated.
I read that too somewhere.
So I wonder what percentage of backpackers are dehydrated.
That's a crazy high amount, though.
It really is.
75 kind of blew me away.
It's a little scary.
So, while we did talk about this earlier, but you want to drink more water at altitude. It's more dehydrating, and you are less likely to feel thirsty at higher altitude. Remember to drink water in all weather, including cold weather, when you may not, again, feel as thirsty or crave water as much or feel the need. Always a good idea to plan your route around water sources and always refill when you can. I would say always plan your route around water. Always. Not that you should let water hinder you from going somewhere, but it's going to determine the kind of experience that you have if you're prepared for the lack of water sources or not. I don't know. Just you got to know what's going on out there so you're ready for it. Again, it's the prior proper prep.
Yes. Triple P.
Yep. Hiking in cooler weather is an option and wouldn't require as much hydration as if you're hiking in hot weather sweating. And just in general, I would say to get in tune with your own body, get to know your thirst sensation, monitor your pee color and your output, and be aware of what is within normal for you. Be aware of how conditions affect hydration. Be prepared to adjust. And just, again, understanding the importance of electrolytes and food and how that kind of intake affects our hydration status and affects that homeostasis, that balance in our bodies.
I love that.
Different weather, weather in and of itself can have such an effect. And of course, the difficulty level will also affect how much hydration you're probably going to need. So just to be giving all these things some thought before you go. It's that triple P.
Triple P, y'all. I want to again recommend, especially if you're female, to look into Dr. Stacy Sims because her work is extensive. It's not just about hydration. It's about working with our physiology as women. She kind of has this whole thing of that women are not just small men. Like, we are unique. Our needs are unique. Our physiology is different. And she had a lot of fascinating things on, like, altitude, acclimation, all that too. So
cool.
We will link all these people.
I can't wait to look her up.
But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed it. I know we've had some pretty research-heavy ones. I think next time we're just going to chat, and then we might take a bit of a break. Do some trips and come back with something new.
Yeah. Some exciting things coming up. So come back in a couple weeks for a more relaxed conversation and just maybe to hear about what's going on with us. But I do hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I know I have, and I've learned some things too, and I'm looking forward to listening back and kind of maybe exploring what I would like to read more about. Yes. So it's kind of a jumping off point too.
I know, it is for me too. I had a bunch of stuff that I was like, I need to know more.
But we should probably stop now. They're like begging us to please stop. Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for hanging in there. And we hope that you've enjoyed the episode and come back again. And we just appreciate you and we love your little faces off.
We sure do. We're sorry and you're welcome.
Yes. So I think it'll be fine. Sorry if it sounds like a pile of mud, you guys.
Yeah, preemptive apology.
Yeah. Go ahead and drop my LaCroix on my papers. It's gonna smear all my notes. Dang it, I'm not gonna know how much water's in the bell pepper.
Damn it.
I know.
I love bell peppers. Side note. Yeah. Diarrhea.
All this hydration talk, I really had to pee.